It's time for part 4 of my ongoing series that I loosely think of as adjustments I've had to make since moving to Bulgaria. With each day that passes, we've been here almost a year now, I confront cultural and behavioral differences that just kind of scramble my American brain. So I started this series to talk about some of the specifics, and today I'm going to walk you through 5 more adjustments slash cultural and behavioral differences that occur in Bulgaria that we didn't have to deal with in the United States. Hi, my name is Maureen. In 2024, I moved to Bulgaria with my husband Jeremy and our 2 tuxedo cats, Damon and Pythias, and I make videos sharing my experiences here so that expats and wannabe expats can make their own informed decisions. Okay, let's jump in. Number 1, the word no is just a place to start. In America, we are taught to take people at their word. And we'd be considered pushy or rude or arrogant if we operated any other way. Expressions like, he doesn't take no for an answer. That's not a compliment in the United States. But I've noticed in many situations here in Bulgaria, when the first answer is no, it doesn't necessarily mean the ultimate answer is going to be no. Sometimes it's an invitation to participate in a further conversation or negotiate or just to continue talking. So here's a couple of examples of that. Recently, we had to go to a notary here in Plovdiv to get something notarized. Now, I have learned in living in different countries that I should expect each new thing that we do to take about 3 attempts. That's the average for us. And then that way, if it comes in to be only 2 attempts, or wow, we get it done in the first shot, that's like a miracle. So we expect it to take 3 attempts. Having said that, we do try to do our homework and our due diligence so that when we go into these experiences, we've maybe headed off some problems beforehand. If we can shave off 1 or 2 visits, well, hope springs eternal. We keep trying. Okay, back to the notary. The document we wanted to have notarized was the rescission of a power of attorney that we gave to an individual when we first started the process of coming over here. And we gave him carte blanche power of attorney, which was our first mistake. We should have limited it in scope. And secondly, we didn't make it for a specific amount of time. It's just pretty much open-ended. So now we have this person out there that has access to our bank accounts and can conduct business on our behalf. And it just doesn't seem like a smart business practice to allow that POA to stay functioning. So we did our research and we found the verbiage in Bulgarian that stipulates what it has to say when you rescind or revoke a power of attorney. We had it all printed out in Bulgarian and English, and we went to the notary. Now, what we have learned that I didn't know before, okay, so in the United States, all a notary does is verify the signature in front of them. That's why they ask for ID. If they don't know who you are, they have to verify that you are who you say you are. They don't even look at the document. What the document says is of no importance to a notary in the United States. That, I have learned, is not the case with notaries in Bulgaria. Big difference. In Bulgaria, notaries serve a much broader function. They're almost like mini judges or mini lawyers in that regard. Not only do they verify your identity, but they attest that you understand what it is you are signing. Okay, big difference from in the US where they don't really care. And if it's not in Bulgarian, they require a certified translator, which now that we understand that makes perfect sense. Because if they're attesting that you understand, you know what you're signing, and it hasn't been translated properly in either language, then how can they swear that they know what it is you are signing? Maybe we didn't even know what it was we were signing. So in we go to the notary, and we don't know anything about how notaries work here. We just assume that they are verifying that we are who we say we are and verifying our signature. So we've been here almost a year, and we just now figured that out, that when you have something notarized by a Bulgarian notary, it's got much more to do with the legality of the document than just verifying your signature. So if you are thinking about moving here and you have to get documents notarized, you're welcome. I just saved you a lot of frustration. Because when we went into the notary, we explained, actually, Jeremy went up to the gal and explained to her what we wanted. And this started a back and forth where, unfortunately, her English was very good. And we appreciate that she was speaking to us in English. We don't expect that. But she didn't explain things very well. And to be honest, she was fairly confrontational, probably because she's had this happen before and people get belligerent and take it out on her. So I think she was going in on the offensive. And she took the document from Jeremy and she looked at it and she said, "You have to bring a translator." Now, bear in mind, we didn't know anything about why we had to bring a translator. And we had the document in Bulgarian and English. And so she starts haggling with Jeremy without really explaining why we had to have a translator. So I'll do another video on customer service in Bulgaria. That's also been an eye-opener. There's been a distinct learning curve about that, but that could take a whole video in and of itself. So they're going back and forth, and I finally decided that maybe I should intervene because the conversation was just kind of going in a circle. So I excused myself and said, "Can you please tell us why we need a translator?" And her answer was to translate the document. And my response, of course, was, "But it's already translated." And all that did was bring me into the cycle, albeit a bit calmer than Jeremy was, but I was still part of this cycle where if she could explain to me why we had to get a translator, it would be a lot easier for us to understand what it was she was trying to say. Now, knowing the function of a notary in Bulgaria, it makes perfect sense, but we didn't know that, and she wasn't explaining that to us, and we're coming at this thing from the mindset of, here's my ID, my passport, my Bulgarian identification card, I've got everything, why can't you just frickin' notarize my document? So finally, we pieced it together. Not 100%, I had to go home and look it up on ChatGPT before I finally got clear. But we pieced it together enough to understand that she had to attest to the fact that we understood what we were signing. Okay, we'll have to come back. That'll be visit number 2. All right, we kind of expected that anyway. One of the things I've learned is that you have to get very detailed about asking the right questions, which is very difficult if you don't know what the process is. You don't know what questions to ask. But I'm getting a little better at it. And so when she kept saying, "You have to bring in a translator, you have to bring in a translator," I then said, "Does it have to be a certified translator?" Because when I hear the word translator or interpreter, it could be just, some bilingual person I pull in off the street. And she says, "Well, of course it has to be certified." I'm like, "Okay, well, you didn't say that." And so I kind of walked away and I heard Jeremy ask, "Do you have anyone that you recommend?" Her immediate answer was no. And so he said, "Okay." So he starts packing up his papers and he starts to walk over to me. And I decided, because I know how this no game works now, I decided to just try one more time. And I went back up to the woman, and she didn't know that I had overheard Jeremy asking. And I just said, "Hey, by any chance, do you have a list of certified translators that we could pick from?" She immediately pulls out a Post-it, writes down somebody's name, the phone number. Jeremy's standing there with his mouth open. It's like, "Hey, you just don't have the touch there, honey." And kind of a postscript to the story, the translator turned out to be marvelous. Perfect English, just really helpful. And when we went back the next day and we walked in there, the same woman was there. She gives the translator a big hug. They're babbling back and forth in Bulgarian. Clearly, they had a very close relationship. So she's somebody that gets recommended repeatedly by the notary. So why she initially told Jeremy no is a mystery. Well, it's not really a mystery. She was perturbed with him because he didn't understand what she was trying to tell him. But we got past all of that. So the moral of that story is, politely as possible, don't always accept no for an answer on the first go round. Here's another example. We rent cars quite frequently from Top Rent a Car. We really like them. They give us great service. And a while back, I rented a car online and I rented it for a certain number of days. When we went to pick up the car, Jeremy and I had talked about scheduling and things we wanted to do, and I realized we wanted the car for a couple of extra days. So we go into the office, and again, they speak very good English, and we're getting everything done to sign the contract. And I said to the agent, oh, by the way, can we extend that for a couple of days? Thinking that would be no problem because it's more money for them. And he tapped on the computer and came back and said, oh, the car's not available for the extra days. And I turned to Jeremy, and this was before I knew about the no is just a place to start philosophy. And not because I was negotiating with the agent or was not taking no for an answer, but more in a problem solving mode. I turned to Jeremy and I said, oh gosh, what are we going to do? It's kind of a deal breaker if we can't extend the car through Wednesday. The next thing I know, the guy's tapping on his computer a few more minutes, and lo and behold, the car is now freed up. I don't know what happened. All I know is the initial no didn't mean no. Third and final story about learning not to take no for an answer. I bought what we in the United States call an elliptical, and here in Europe they call a cross trainer. So it's, a machine where you're doing this. That's one of the few exercise machines I will actually use consistently, and not just to hang clothes over, but I actually use it to exercise on a daily basis. So it's important to me to have one of those in my home. So I went down to Technopolis, which is kind of the Best Buy of Bulgaria, and I picked up several items, found myself a great salesman who again spoke English. And while we were there, I realized that they also had exercise equipment. So I don't think that was really his department, but he took me over there because the salesman that was in that department didn't speak English. So he stayed with me to help me out. And they had this elliptical that just looked perfect. And he let me hop on it and use it, and it was great. And I told him I would buy it. And one of them went to the computer and tap, 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 and came back and said, all we have is the floor model. And I'm thinking, this is great. The floor model is already put together, whereas a new one from the back was going to have to be assembled. And we've moved so much, and I've bought so many ellipticals. My poor husband has assembled them. He has gone above and beyond in that regard. So the fact that I could get this already put together was just great. So I tell the salesman that, and he says, oh no, we have to take it apart and put it back in the box to deliver it. And I gave him my you're kidding me look. And this was way back at the beginning. I didn't know anything about the don't take no for an answer philosophy. And I just said, but why? I don't understand. That's always my thing is if I know why, I'm much more likely to cooperate as opposed to just because this is the way it's done. I don't operate that way. If you tell me the reason why something needs to be done in a certain way, then things just go a whole lot more smoothly because my American brain processes that and say, oh yeah, that actually makes sense, rather than because this is how we do it here. So we kind of went back and forth, and he was very nice and very apologetic, but said, no, this is how we have to send it to you. And I'm standing there debating because I really wanted this cross trainer machine, but I really didn't want to put Jeremy through that hassle all over again. So I'm dithering and debating. And again, it wasn't meant to be a persuasion technique. I did not know that I had the option to persuade them. I was just really stumped about what to do. And he disappeared and came back a few minutes later and said, don't worry about it. We'll bring it to you assembled the way that it is. I don't know why. All of a sudden, it just became possible. So the lesson here is forget your American ways. When you come to Bulgaria, no does not necessarily mean no. Number 2, it's not standard here for delivery people to bring items inside your home. Now, this isn't so much a cultural difference as it is a practical and logistical one, but I didn't see this one coming when we first moved to Bulgaria. So if you're a regular follower of this channel, you've seen my house tour video, and you know that we live on the second floor of a home and we do not have an elevator. or as they say in Great Britain, a lift. No matter what you call it, a lift or an elevator, bottom line, we don't have one. So the first time I went to buy furniture, I bought some bulky things, a new bed and a new mattress, things that were heavy and bulky. And when I went to check out with the English speaking salesman and we were talking about delivery, there was a delivery charge and we were working out when the delivery was going to happen. And because I'm used to this in the United States, I said, oh, by the way, we live on the second floor and there's no elevator. I don't know if there's an additional fee for that. And the salesman just got a very uncomfortable look on his face. And he said, well, we don't necessarily bring things into your home. We just typically drop them off in the driveway. Now, I'm flummoxed by this. We don't really know anybody here at that point, and I'm thinking, okay, where am I going to find two burly guys to get this stuff up the stairs? And it just, sometimes things just don't compute when I first hear them, and I have to stand there and process it for a couple of minutes. And by that time, the moment's gone. You know, the moment's just gone. So I think I expressed some surprise, and he said, well, you can probably slip them some cash and see if they will be willing to bring it upstairs. And I'm thinking, well, okay, I don't speak Bulgarian. I'm not really sure how this is going to fly, but okay. So sure enough, they came out and I did some gyrations and I offered them a gratuity, and they did bring the stuff up to our apartment, but it's not the norm. We've had other deliveries since then. The second time the same store came out, I offered them a tip and they grumbled, but they did do it. The third time, I was not here, and Jeremy asked them if they would bring it up and offered them some cash, and they flat out told him no, which resulted in Jeremy being here by himself, dragging a bunch of heavy stuff up the stairs and throwing out his back, and that resulted in like 6 months of acupuncture and PT. So it was a pretty big deal that they didn't do that. I've also noticed, as a side note, that Bulgarian men tend to respond better to requests from me than from Jeremy. I don't know whether that's a man-woman thing. I don't know, but that may explain why Jeremy got a flat-out no when he asked about them bringing things up the stairs. And the delivery of the aforementioned elliptical / cross trainer machine, I did have to bribe the guys to bring it up the stairs, but they did it. So I did get that to come up, which is good because that's a big, bulky, heavy machine. Number 3, there is a much heavier emphasis here than there is in the United States on socializing and friends and family. This is the thing I love the most about Bulgarians. They place a very high value on family, friends, and neighbors. In fact, I have a theory, and my theory is that the reason that a lot of companies don't offer to bring things up to your second floor apartment is because Bulgarians know everybody, and it's just not a big deal to call your neighbor or your cousin and say, hey, come on over here and help me carry this up the stairs. It's just expected. Whereas for us, we don't have that support system in place. So my theory is why they don't have to bring things up to your apartment is because they don't have to. And when you do enlist the help of your people, in addition to them helping, it becomes an opportunity for social engagement. They just party. They bring it upstairs and then they have some rakia and then they smoke their cigarettes. And the next thing you know, it's turned into an all-day affair. That's a slight exaggeration, but you do get my drift. And when I think about it, the very way that houses and dwellings are designed in Bulgaria fosters this as opposed to the way they are designed in the United States. Let me explain. So the US is a very car-centric society, much more so than probably any European country, and houses are designed to facilitate the automobile and privacy. So most newer homes, there's some exceptions now, they're building neighborhoods that are actually designed to promote more interaction, but before those became trendy, most housing designs in the United States are made so that you pull into the driveway, you press your electric garage door opener, the door slides up, you pull in, the door comes down behind you, you get out of your car, you are not subjected to the eyes of your neighbors because you are in your garage, then you go into your home, generally through a door that goes right into the kitchen. voila, you have made it home and didn't have to interact with any of your neighbors. And when you do things outdoors, typically in the United States, houses are designed so that's done in the backyard. So that's where your deck is, your patio, where you do your barbecuing. That's where you have your patio furniture, is in the backyard. So you're hanging out with your family in the backyard. You're not sitting on the front porch and talking and waving at your neighbors as they go by. In case you haven't noticed, Americans are very fond of their privacy. Bulgarians, totally different story. First of all, in the cities here, many more apartments than houses. So that's communal living right there. And in the areas that do have houses, not a lot of the houses have garages. And if they do, they're generally full of stuff. And the Bulgarians have to leave their car parked on the sidewalk in front of the house anyway. Bulgarians also walk a lot more than Americans do, which puts them out and about in their neighborhoods. Even if they own cars, they wouldn't think of hopping in the car and driving 2 or 3 blocks to go to their neighborhood produce stand. Going to the produce stand is an opportunity to socialize. It puts people out and about in their neighborhoods. And a little side note about these walks through the neighborhood, which I just think is the coolest thing going, is if you pay attention as you're walking, you will see quite frequently there are benches placed on the sidewalks in front of people's homes. That's intentional because people sit out there in the course of a day. It becomes a social opportunity. And my understanding, and I know a lot of Bulgarians watch this channel, so correct me, they actually have a name for them that translates to a bench party. It's pick-up party, which I'm sure I have butchered, but that's the gist of it. And I first heard about that and was like, oh, this is so cool. Particularly in the evening, in the summer, when it stays light longer, you'll see people sitting outside. Sometimes it's grandparents and parents, and the kids are riding bikes, and the parents are socializing. And it's just this wonderful custom that they do here. And the whole emphasis is on getting out of your 4 walls of your home and interacting and socializing with other people. We live in the city, but we've driven through Bulgarian villages, and these older people at that point, because it's during the day and they're retired, they're not at work, they're a staple. You'd swear it was the same people in every village. They kind of run to a type and they just sit around under a patio umbrella or not on these benches, and they're just connecting and socializing with each other. And I just think it's great. In my neighborhood, there's a patch of grass that's in a V shape where 2 streets come together in a fork. And in that patch of grass, somebody has put up an awning and benches. And I don't think I've ever walked by and not seen it occupied. It's right across the street from the produce stand, the little store, the mini market in our neighborhood. And people come and they hang out there. There's some other shops there as well. There's a pet store, there's a beauty salon. And when they're not busy, they scoot across the street and hang out with the locals. It is just such a fun environment. I think of Bulgaria as an ongoing party, and everyone seems to be invited. That's just not the mentality that we have in the United States. And I'm sure there are reasons for it, not the least of which is how many hours most Americans work in the course of a week just to make ends meet. I'm sure there's a sociological reason why we're not conditioned that way, but that's not the purpose of this video. I just find it interesting how much more of an emphasis there is in Bulgaria on interacting with other people as opposed to privacy and isolation. Number 4, and this one I struggle with, and it is the notion that in Bulgaria, as Americans, we are perceived as wealthy. And I really struggle with that concept. Now, this is going to touch some nerves. Someone's going to put a comment on this video about how I think I'm better than everybody else because I have more money than the average Bulgarian, which is just, it's just crap. I just don't think that. So if you put that comment down there, I'm going to delete it anyway because it's just not helpful or constructive. What I struggle with is that perception that we have more than people who were born here. Obviously, not everybody, there are wealthy Bulgarians, but it's not necessarily a misperception. The reality is, when you come to Bulgaria, and you bring your US income with you, whether it's a business, whether it's from a rental property, whether it's from your Social Security or your pension, you bring that income with you and you are living on Bulgarian expenses, then you're going to end up having more disposable income than you would have had in the US. In the United States, Jeremy and I are just regular working people. We're not considered wealthy or having more than the average person. Now, in the US, we didn't struggle to pay our bills by any means. But the reality is, when my kids were small and I was a single mom, there was a lot of what we say in the US of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And sometimes Paul didn't get paid back. Whenever I've had to make a choice about buying something in the US, sticking to my budget has always been part of the equation that enabled me to decide whether or not I was going to buy something. And at this point in my life, it's just become an ingrained habit to the point where even though we have more wiggle room in our finances now, it's still a conditioned habit that I have to pay attention to price and to spend my money wisely. So sometimes it's very strange and uncomfortable that others look at us through the lens of being wealthy. And here in Bulgaria, because of the income difference, we're sometimes viewed as being much better off financially than we actually feel. And navigating that is a learning curve. And that's something I have to sit with, that gap between how I perceive myself and how I'm perceived by others in my new country. It doesn't make the perception wrong. It's just a nuance that is totally new for us and that we grapple with more often than not. And living here has made me rethink the term comfortable and what that really means and how much of our reality is shaped by financial perceptions. Now, sometimes that's a negative thing. This was more of a problem for us in Ecuador than I have found it to be in Bulgaria. But it's that because we are perceived as wealthy, we are often quoted a higher price than a native. As I said, that was rampant in Ecuador, not so much here. Most prices tend to be fixed, and so there's not a lot of negotiating that goes on. That has been an issue for us, where being perceived as wealthy has actually caused us to take a hit to our pocketbooks because we are quoted a higher price for something. So the bottom line on this is I'm grateful for the breathing room that living in Bulgaria gives us, but I also understand it comes with a commitment to support our local communities. We try to shop from local vendors as opposed to the big chain stores as much as we possibly can. We do support the local shops. We do support Bulgarian charities. I feel that that is our obligation to do as being accepted by the Bulgarian community. It just seems like the right way to balance this odd dynamic of all of a sudden being well off, where our perceptions are more reflective of our scrappy, work hard to make ends meet upbringing that Jeremy and I have both experienced. So yeah, it's a learning curve, but it's part of the adventure. Number 5, on a much lighter tone, did you know that in Bulgaria, they celebrate what's called name days? Love this concept. My name day is July 17th. And what it is if you have any name or derivative of an Orthodox Christian saint, they celebrate the name day of that saint. And anyone who has that name or a derivative of it, that's your name day. And it's almost treated like a birthday. You get presents, it's awesome. Now, sometimes you have to play with the endings of the syllables in order to make your name day fit. My name is Maureen. It is definitely a very Irish sounding name, but July 17th is Marina. Close enough, I'll take it. Jeremy's is going to be probably Jeremiah, and his is sometime in the spring. But yeah, people bring you gifts and presents, and you have parties and you celebrate on your name day. So you have your Mother's Day, your Father's Day, your birthday, and then in Bulgaria, you also get a name day. I have not yet been invited to a name day party, but I'm waiting. So that's been our crash course in Bulgaria for this month, learning how to say no and what that means, bench parties, name days, being perceived as different than we perceive ourselves, and then there's those stare-defying deliveries. Living here continues to stretch us. It asks us to broaden our expectations and adapt to new rhythms and how to show up in the community that we've chosen. And honestly, I just love that. Bulgaria continues to surprise me, and that's what makes every day feel like an adventure. It reminds me that moving to a new country is not just about the paperwork and the bureaucracy. It's about learning who you get to be in this new place. Any of this helps you avoid headaches or just makes you feel more at home here, please like and subscribe. We'd love to have you as a regular viewer. I do try to post once a week, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.